Hey everyone. Call me Mike. I'm 44, and for the last 17 years, I've worked in a field that most people associate with magic and cryptic symbols on a black screen. I'm an engineer. Specifically, my title now is Lead Infrastructure Architect, but to the old-timers in the company, I'm still just the guy who fixes the internet when things go really south. My career started way back in 2006. Back then, the company I still work for was called Next Tech Solutions, and was crammed into the basement of some building in downtown Seattle. There were 6 of us. The founder, a crazy genius named Steve who could solder a microchip and write a driver for it overnight, his wife Linda, accountant, marketer, janitor, and office mom, all in one, and 4 other geeks like me. I joined as a 22-year-old kid who'd just dropped out of college because they offered me $25K a year and the chance to touch hardware with my own hands. The first 5 years were incredible. We didn't just work, we lived it. We were building an internet service provider in a region where even ADSL was a luxury back then. I remember manually pulling fiber optic cable in an office complex, spending nights configuring Cisco routers we got from auctions for scrap metal prices. I knew every single screw in our server rooms. I knew that the power supply on the server named Gandalf, it handled billing, would start whining if the rack temperature went above 25 degrees Celsius. I knew that the Boromir switch in the Spokane data center would crash every 6 months from an ARP table overflow, and you just had to reboot it manually because the automatic script for some reason never worked. I kept all of this in my head. We didn't have documentation. It was all in our heads. And it worked. The company grew. We survived the 2008 crisis when competitors tried to buy us out, but we fought back. We acquired 2 smaller players. Nextech Solutions morphed into Nexus Communications Inc., a corporation with offices in 15 states and 3,000 employees. Steve sold his stake to an investment fund and moved to Hawaii, but I stayed. I worked my way up from field technician to lead engineer. I became the guy people came to when the apocalypse hit. I wasn't a manager. I was a tech architect. My salary was above average, but not insane. It suited me. I had my own house, 2 dogs, and could mostly plan my own day because management knew. If Mike says a task will take 3 days, it'll take 3 days, not because he's lazy, but because there are a ton of hidden pitfalls no one else knows about. I was valued for my experience. Then, 2 years ago, a turning point came. Amidst the wave of digital transformation and efficiency, the board of directors hired a new chief technology officer, CTO. A man who was supposed to take our infrastructure to the next level. His name was Chester Winthrop III. I'm not kidding, he actually used that 3 in his email signature. Chester was around 38. He wore non-prescription glasses just to look smarter, had his suits made by some expensive tailor in New York, and loved buzzwords like disruptive, agile transformation, and Kubernetes native. At the very first meeting with our department, there were 12 engineers. Then Chester plastered the walls with sticky notes covered in values and started preaching. He said our infrastructure was technical debt, that we operated like an artisanal workshop instead of an industrial giant. That we had no culture of documentation, no code review culture, no all-in culture. He spoke beautifully. The younger engineers, hired in the last couple of years, listened with their mouths open. But me and 2 other old-timers, Dave and Steve Jr., the founder's son who stayed on as an engineer, not an heir, felt uneasy. Chester, I said, raising my hand, what you call an artisanal workshop has had 99.99% uptime for the last 5 years. We don't have tier 4 data centers, but we have people who know how to fix anything with their bare hands. Chester looked at me with a polite smile, like you'd look at a particularly dumb but harmless dog. Mike, I know your background. You're an old-school hero. But heroes don't scale. What happens if you get hit by a bus? Our whole network crashes because you're the only one who remembers the console password for that router in Ohio? That's a risk we can't afford. We need processes. I stayed quiet. There was logic in his words, but it was logic detached from reality. 2 other people knew that router password. They were just in different time zones. And the process he was proposing meant drowning us in bureaucracy. Then the fun began. Chester brought in his own team. Well, one key player, Kyle. Kyle was his right-hand man, and, apparently, an old buddy. Kyle was around 35. He wore trendy $1,000 sneakers and Star Wars t-shirts, trying to seem like one of the guys to the IT crowd. But his eyes were empty, like a shark's. Kyle got the title, Senior Director of Engineering Operations. Kyle's first move was to implement a system of metrics. We had to report every sneeze in Jira. Create tickets for everything, including get coffee. Daily stand-ups started, where we had to report what we did yesterday and what we do today, even though our job often consisted of sitting around waiting for something to break, or deep analysis that didn't fit into I closed 3 tickets yesterday format. Dave, my colleague with 20 years of experience, was the first to crack. At one stand-up, when Kyle started grilling him about why the task, update DNS documentation, had been pending for 3 days, Dave exploded. Because, Kyle, DNS documentation is 500 pages, and I have to verify every single record, because if I make a mistake, we'll take down the entire company's email for an hour. But you just want a checkbox in your stupid Excel file. Kyle smiled the same polite smile as Chester. Dave, I understand your feelings. But we need to be predictable. 3 days is 24 man-hours. If you need more, we should discuss it during the planning phase. A month later, Dave quit. He went to a tiny outfit that did automation for farms. Said he'd rather configure Wi-Fi for cows than put up with those posers. I stayed. Stubbornness, I guess. And a sense of ownership. I built this network. I couldn't just hand it over to these efficiency experts. The next 6 months were torture. Chester and Kyle methodically reshaped everything to their liking. They hired consultants from the company Chester used to work for at insane rates to optimize our processes. The consultants, 3 pimply guys who didn't know the difference between STP and OSPF, wandered around the office for 2 weeks asking stupid questions and eventually produced a 200-page report stating that we needed to migrate to a microservice architecture, and implement a DevOps culture. Thanks, Captain Obvious. Then they started switching vendors. The old companies we'd worked with for years, who knew our equipment and would show up at the first call, were replaced with new, cheaper and more modern ones. I warned that these new guys couldn't handle the specifics of our old systems, but no one listened. Outages started, small ones at first, then bigger. Once, the new contractors messed up the wiring when connecting new equipment in the data center, knocking out half a rack. I went there at night and manually switched the power feeds while the data center security guard held a flashlight for me. At the morning stand-up, I reported the incident. Kyle asked, "Why didn't you call the contractor per the SLA?" Because, Kyle, by the time they mobilize and drive over, 3 hours would have passed. It took me 40 minutes to get there and fix it. That's called saving time, I replied. Kyle pursed his lips disapprovingly. He didn't like me solving problems without his processes. The climax came with the network core modernization project. We were planning to replace old routers that had been running for 8 years. I proposed a proven model from our old vendor, compatible with all our existing hardware and software. Chester and Kyle shot it down. "Mike, that's last century," Chester said at the meeting. "We're going to build the new core on white box solutions running open source software. It's flexible, cheap, and modern." Chester, I tried to reason with him. "That's risky. We don't have a team with that level of expertise in that software. We'll spend a year experimenting, and the network will be down. Let's at least run a pilot on a small segment." "No, Mike. We're going to do this fast and decisively. That's my decision." I left that meeting with the feeling that our ship was heading straight for an iceberg, and the captain had ordered full speed ahead to make it more exciting. 3 weeks later, the inevitable happened. Kyle personally oversaw the cutover to the new core on a Friday night. He wanted it done fast so everyone would be amazed Monday morning. Naturally, it went sideways. The new routers, configured based on internet tutorials, refused to accept BGP announcements from the old ones. The entire network went down. Completely. Immediately. Without warning. I got the call at 2 a.m. I drove to the office. Panic reigned. Kyle was running around the server room, waving his arms and yelling at the junior engineers. Chester showed up too, but stood off to the side with a stony face, trying to look like he was in control. I walked up to a console, checked the logs, checked the configs. It was bad. They'd wiped the old configurations without a full backup. Restoring from old configs wasn't working due to protocol incompatibilities. I turned to Chester. Well, Chester, enjoying your flexibility. Mike, this isn't the time for irony. We need to do something. Clients are calling, he said through gritted teeth. I know what to do. Roll everything back, but it'll take 6 to 7 hours. And I need full access and for everyone to stay out of my way. Chester nodded. I got to work. I rebuilt the network from memory, from old notes in my notebook, from logs I'd managed to save. I manually reconnected cables because the automation wasn't working either. By Sunday morning, the network was more or less alive. By Monday, we had main traffic flowing, but with limitations. At the Monday morning meeting, Chester and Kyle acted like nothing had happened. Kyle said, "We conducted a complex migration. There were some challenges, but the team handled it. We gained valuable experience." I stared at him, feeling lava boil inside me. "What experience, Kyle?" I asked loudly. "The experience of how not to do things. The experience of taking down the entire network for 2 days because of arrogance and lack of a plan B? The experience of me, one old engineer, having to clean up the mess from your idiocy because you refused to listen to people who actually know what they're doing." Silence fell over the room. Chester looked at me coldly. "Mike, your contribution is valuable. But your tone is inappropriate. We're all learning. If you're unhappy with the working methods, we can discuss your future with the company privately. For now, please refrain from emotional outbursts." It was a threat, an open threat. I realized they were just pushing me out. I had become a symbol of the old guard. They needed to purge to build their new world. After that outage, Chester and Kyle made their move. I was called into Chester's office. Kyle was there too. "Mike," Chester began with fake sympathy. "We conducted a performance review for the past year. Unfortunately, the metrics are unsatisfactory. You didn't pass the new technology certification we organized. Your code reviews take too long. We've decided that the architect position is redundant for you." Kyle added, barely hiding his glee. "We have 2 options for you, Mike. Either you transfer to a second-line support engineer role, ticket handling, shifts, night duties, with a corresponding salary reduction, of course, or we sign a severance agreement with 3 months' pay." I sat there, looking at them. 2 weasels in human form. They weren't even hiding that this was revenge. Revenge for me being right, for me daring to question their competence, for making them look like idiots in front of the whole department after that outage. A storm raged inside me. I wanted to stand up, flip the table, and tell them where to go. But I held back. Instead, I said, "I need to think about it. Until Friday." Chester looked surprised. He'd clearly expected a scandal, a tantrum, anything but calm acceptance. "All right, Mike, until Friday. I hope you make the right decision." I left the office. My mind was blank. I'd worked here for 17 years. 17 years. I built this damn company. And now some upstarts with MBAs and empty eyes were deciding I was trash. At home, I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my armchair. The dogs, sensing my mood, quieted down and rested their heads on my lap. I sat there staring at the wall. Quit? But go where? At 44, with my experience but without the fresh Kubernetes and Terraform certifications? Everywhere I applied, they'd ask why I left. Tell the truth? Who would believe that a big company's CTO was a fraud? They'd think I was a toxic old guy who couldn't work in a team. I decided I wouldn't give up that easily. I wouldn't quit. Let them transfer me to support. I'd sit there and do exactly what the job description said. Not a single line of code more. Not one more piece of advice. Let their modern infrastructure crumble without me. It would be classic malicious compliance. But fate, or maybe my own personality, had another path in store for me. A couple of days after that conversation, I needed to access an old server cabinet in what used to be the lab. Now that room was Kyle's open space for innovation. I needed a specific adapter that I knew was still there from the old days. I went into the room late in the evening when almost everyone had left. Kyle wasn't there. His desk, as always, was a creative mess. And among that mess, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. A black USB drive shaped like a tiny Lego man. Next to it lay an open laptop. The screen wasn't locked. I'm not a thief. I never snoop through other people's things. But something clicked. I moved closer. On the screen was some text editor open with a chat log. My eyes scanned the lines. And what I saw made my blood run cold. Chest. How much is our cut from the last tender? Kyle_boy, 15% already in the accounts. The rest next week when the reports are signed. Chest. Good. Make sure Mike and those old farts don't catch wind of it. They might start asking questions about the new prices. Kyle_boy, don't worry. In a month, Mike will be running the janitorial closet, if he's even still here. No one cares about him. I read on, unable to believe my eyes. This wasn't just about skimming. This was direct proof they were taking kickbacks from the vendors they'd forced on us. Those cheap and modern contractors were their personal piggy bank. They were bleeding the company I'd spent half my life building dry, just for their own enrichment. Adrenaline flooded my system. I moved on autopilot. I had my work USB drive with me. I plugged it into Kyle's laptop, quickly copied the chat log file onto it, closed the editor window, hoping he wouldn't notice the file had been resaved with a modified date. I didn't know if autosave was on, pulled out the drive, shoved it in my pocket, and left the room, trying to breathe normally. At home, I opened the file. It was a goldmine, dozens of pages of chat logs spanning months. Discussions of amounts, names of shell companies, offshore bank accounts. Kyle once jokingly mentioned the Cayman Islands. Talk of how to bypass compliance, how to forge signatures on tender documents. And names. Real names of people they were transferring money to. I held a nuclear warhead in my hands. But how to use it? Go to the police? I wasn't sure our local cops could handle cybercrime at this level. Go to the CEO? His name was Howard, a board appointee who came a year after Steve left. I barely knew him. He might not believe me, and if Chester and Kyle found out about my accusations, they'd destroy the evidence and fire me for slander. Plus, I'd obtained the file illegally. I could be charged with hacking myself. I decided to act carefully, like a sapper. I needed to expose the truth in a way that left me clean, but got the job done. The next morning, Chester, apparently feeling triumphant after my apparent agreement to think it over, decided to publicly finish me off. At an all-hands department meeting, he announced a restructuring. We're creating a new digital transformation team. Kyle will lead it. It will consist of our most promising young engineers. The old guard, he looked at me, will handle legacy system support. We need to clear the path for young talent. Kyle stood up and started talking about the new future. I looked at him and didn't see a manager. I saw a petty crook gloating about his scam. The young engineers clapped. They didn't know their leader was stealing company money, their salaries. After the meeting, one of the interns, Jared, approached me. A 23-year-old kid who actually knew his code. Mike, he said quietly. I don't get it. We're lost without you guys. Who's going to explain how these old systems work? There's nothing in the documentation. Jared, I replied. Teach yourself. Google it. Read the manuals. Everything I could teach isn't needed anymore. You've got your digital transformation now. I went to my desk and started planning. A plan for revenge, but legal revenge. I didn't just want to leak info online. I wanted them to hang themselves, and I wanted a front row seat. First, I didn't go to Howard. I went to the Internal Audit and Compliance Department. A woman named Susan worked there. Susan was an old-timer, like me. She joined the company about 10 years ago and knew the financial flows inside out. We'd occasionally chat at company parties and respected each other's professionalism. She was the type who wouldn't bow to a new boss if financial violations were involved. I went to her office and closed the door. Susan, I need your professional advice, off the record. She put down her papers and looked at me intently. I'm listening, Mike. Have you noticed anything strange with the new equipment and service procurements? Especially from the vendors Chester and Kyle brought in? Susan frowned. I see prices are above market average, but procurement has justifications. Chester personally signs off on these contracts, says it's for quality and innovation. Susan, I've worked with this hardware for 17 years. I know its real cost. These vendors' innovation consists of sending us defective parts and billing double. I can't prove it, but I'm almost certain this is about kickbacks. Just take a closer look at the companies Apex Logistics and Strato Cloud Services. Look at their owners, look at the payment chain. I'm giving you a lead. You take it from there. Susan was silent for a long time. Then she nodded. I understand, Mike. I'll look into it. But without solid proof, I can't do anything. They're too high up. Find the proof, Susan. I believe in you. I didn't tell her about the file. Not yet. I gave her a starting point to start digging officially. A pro like her, if she starts digging, will find the trail eventually. I just needed to nudge things. A week passed. Chester called me, reminding me my decision deadline was Friday. Mike, have you decided? Yes, Chester. I accept the transfer to support. Go ahead with the paperwork. Chester actually seemed thrown off by my compliance. He'd expected a fight. Well, okay. We'll process it. I was transferred from a spacious office with a park view to an open-plan cube farm where the support team sat. They gave me an old computer buried in tickets. My new job consisted of answering calls from irritated users and fixing their password and printer problems. It was humiliating, but I gritted my teeth. I was waiting. Meanwhile, I started phase 2. I began, accidentally, leaving trails. At lunch in the cafeteria, I casually mentioned within earshot of Kyle that I'd heard from a friend at a bank that some IT firms were having tax problems due to shady schemes. Kyle paled but said nothing. A few days later, I went to the smoking area. Yes, I smoke sometimes when stressed, and saw Chester there. I pretended not to notice him and started talking on the phone to a friend. Yeah, listen, things are a mess here too. The new bosses are such assholes, I tell you. But I hear compliance is already digging under them. Yeah, Susan, our auditor, found something. Word is, there'll be a big showdown soon. Anyway, gotta go, bye. I hung up. Chester's face was like stone, but I saw his eye twitch. The final touch. I needed them to panic and make a mistake. I sent an anonymous email from a burner account to the chairman of the board. Short and dry. Look into the activities of your CTO Chester Winthrop and his deputy Kyle. They've set up a kickback scheme through Apex and Strato Cloud. Evidence is on their computers. Check their chat history. The effect was like a bomb going off. 2 days after my anonymous email, real auditors showed up. Not Susan's internal team, but external auditors from the headquarters of the investment fund that owned the company. Serious guys in black suits with briefcases and cold eyes. Chester and Kyle panicked. I saw them running around the hallways clutching their laptops, whispering in corners. Susan walked around with a triumphant look, keeping quiet. The climax came on Thursday. I was at my support desk, reading another ticket about a forgotten password, when I heard noise. Loud voices in the hallway. I went to look. The scene was epic. 2 of our security guards and 2 men in plainclothes, definitely not our guys, were standing outside Chester's office. The door was open. I could hear Kyle's voice from inside. You have no right. That's my private correspondence. This is illegal. Then Chester walked out. He was pale as a ghost. Behind him came the man in the sharp suit, holding Kyle's laptop. Mr. Winthrop, you are under arrest on suspicion of fraud and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. Chester looked around. His eyes darted over the faces of the onlookers and stopped on me for a second. There was disbelief in his eyes. He couldn't understand how this happened. He, the smart, modern, efficient manager, had lost to some old engineer he'd exiled to tech support. He didn't know that all this time, I wasn't the victim, I was the hunter. Kyle was let out next. He was crying, real tears. His trendy sneakers squeaked pathetically on the floor. All the way to the elevator, he whimpered. It wasn't me, it was all Chester. He came up with it. I just did what he said. They got into the elevator, and the doors closed. Dead silence fell over the hallway, which a moment later exploded into a buzz of voices. After Chester and Kyle's arrest, a big cleanup started at the company. It turned out they'd stolen about $4 million in a year and a half. The shell company vendors were registered to Chester's wife and Kyle's cousin. The scandal was huge. The investment fund was furious. 2 weeks later, I was called in to see Howard, the CEO. I walked into his office, and the first thing I saw was 2 cups of coffee and a small plate of cookies on his desk. Mike, have a seat, he said wearily. Thanks for coming. I sat down. I want to apologize to you, Howard began. Personally, and on behalf of the company. How you were treated was a disgrace. And that we, management, allowed it, that's on us. I know that you were the one who initiated the investigation. Susan told me everything, about your visit to her, and about some of your other actions. He looked at me with a knowing smile. Don't worry, we know about the anonymous email and how you accidentally left an open chat on Kyle's computer the day of the audit. But given the circumstances, we've decided to overlook it. More importantly, we owe you our thanks." I said nothing. Everything inside me was churning, but I kept calm. Chester and Kyle are under arrest. They're looking at up to 10 years in prison. The company is recovering the money through insurance and confiscation of their assets. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is, we've realized that our old-timers aren't legacy, they're a gold mine. I want to offer you a new position. Director of Infrastructure Development. You'll be responsible for the entire technology strategy. You'll have a department of 30 people reporting to you. Salary double your previous one. And, Mike. He slid a keycard across the desk. Here's your new office. The one Chester used. We've completely refurnished it. I hope you like it. I took the card. My head was spinning. Revenge had succeeded. But instead of triumph, I felt a kind of emptiness and fatigue. I accept, Howard. But on one condition. What's that? First thing, I'm rehiring Dave. And a couple of other guys who were laid off or quit because of this mess. We need people with experience. Howard smiled. Deal. Do whatever you think is right. I'm sitting in Chester's old office. The first thing I did was throw out his trendy abstract art and hang an old photo from 2007 on the wall. In it, the six of us are standing arm in arm in front of our first server rack built from scrap. Steve, Linda, me, Dave, and two other guys who've long since scattered. We're young, happy, and exhausted. That picture now hangs right opposite my desk. Dave came back. He turned down a full-time position, said he likes his farm life, but agreed to be an external consultant and occasionally drops by for coffee and to complain about the new ways. The young engineers who used to applaud Kyle now come to me with questions. I don't refuse them. I teach them, but differently. I make them write documentation, not just for a checkbox, but for real usefulness. I make them understand the old code before writing new stuff. I tell them, technologies come and go. But understanding how things work under the hood, that stays forever. Recently, I got a notification on LinkedIn. Chester tried to add me as a connection. Seriously. Probably sitting at home under house arrest, scrolling through his feed, trying to network. I hit decline and blocked him. Kyle, according to rumors, is testifying against Chester, trying to get a reduced sentence. Word is, Chester hates him now and is blaming everything on Kyle. Love and friendship, tested by kickbacks. And me? I just keep doing my job. The same job I've always done. Only now, when I walk out of my office, Chester's old office, and head to the server room to personally check a new power supply, the junior admins respectfully greet me and step aside. The moral of the story? I don't know. Maybe it's that you shouldn't count out the old-timers too soon. We might not know all the trendy buzzwords, but we know where the bodies are buried. And sometimes when the efficiency experts show up with clean resumes and empty eyes, it's the old-timers who can tell real work from a soap bubble. And pop that bubble at exactly the right time and place. Also, always keep your old USB drives. You never know when they might come in handy.